Olympic gold medalist from 2016, the women's hockey team. So can we please welcome Crista Cullen to the stage? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, and it's been so enlightening actually listening to the various different presentations so far. Just to kick us off, I do have a little bit of experience of the hospitality sector. I was actually brought up in it. My father was an MD of a 5-star hotel on the coast of Kenya. And his idea of childcare was for me to sit aged 8 and host a table of 8 of his biggest clients in an evening. So I understand how all-encompassing your environments are. I understand how it works. And hopefully I'll be able to allude a little bit through my journey as to how there's correlations to your world. I agree with much of what's been said. I'm passionate people perform. So how do you create a unity within a group in order to achieve exactly that? So firstly, just a little bit about me. I was brought up in Africa, in Kenya, and at the age of 12 got sent away to a boarding school, a posh boarding school in the Midlands, and kind of didn't really fit in, being somewhat of a feral child. And I found it really, really difficult to conform. And I've always been an individual in a non-conformist culture. So within the whole environment, it's always been a long journey for me. Now, to set the record straight, I come from failure. And that's really important, I think, too. I think when you realize how painful failure can be, only then do you actually relish in success. So to take you through that, the Great Britain women's team, when I was put into it at age 17, we went to a qualification tournament to try and qualify for Athens. We were the favourites. We went to Auckland, and we ended up losing in the 5th, 6th playoff to not qualify, and the Koreans beat us with 20 seconds to go. It still cuts me today, as you can tell. And it's been a long old journey since then, all the way through to Beijing, where we ended up coming 6th, to London, where we got bronze, and then finally to Rio, where we ultimately got what we all had been working so hard for. We talk about people, and I sat along 3 other athletes, all of which came from failure in Athens. And for athletes to do 4 Olympic cycles together, I think that moment when we finally stood on that podium, all looked each other in the eye and burst into tears because of that journey that we'd all been on. And that's what's so special, and that's what I want to enlighten you with today. So I am the underdog. We were ranked 7th in the world in Rio. We had expectations to do well, but we also had incredible critics. And that is the British media, and I'm sure we all know it. But 5 weeks prior to the Olympic Games in Rio, we held an event in East London at the Olympic Stadium. And that event is called the Champions Trophy event. Top 8 nations in the world, all playing off in front of our home crowd. So we talk about the way we train and the periodization of training and performing for the big occasion. So we were not, ladies and gentlemen, training to perform at our Olympic stadium 5 weeks prior to the Olympics. So when that microphone was thrust into our face by said media saying, "Do you really believe the fact you come 7th out of 8th in the world 5 weeks prior to the Olympic Games, you genuinely are going to contend for an Olympic gold medal?" And 100% we all said, yes, we will. And we were laughed at. And that's okay. What they didn't know is the amount of training that we were going through in that phase. Because we were preparing, before you taper in our sport, 5 weeks prior to the games, you start to taper in so that you start to actually get some energy levels up. So we were getting beasted, we call it, running hard before stepping out on the field to take on world number 3, Argentina. And of course, we're coming up short. And we weren't connecting well. Things weren't going well. To ironically, just a few weeks later, to do what we said we were always going to do. And that in itself is relatively unique, because just because we thought we were good enough, it was about knowing your job. It was about a training environment, which I'll go into, which enabled you to take educated risk, which enabled you to take on a challenge and thrive in that environment. We've heard a lot about individuals within a team. The coach himself will say he surrounded himself with intelligent hockey players to make decisions off a framework. He didn't pick the best hockey players, he picked the intelligent ones, so that he could constantly, tactically or technically challenge us to try and give us issues that then we could combine together, solve problems, and go out there and live it. So as I've said, passionate people perform. Our environment, ladies and gents, the reason why I think we were successful is because categorically we had a culture that we created. And this is what I'm passionate about now, bringing into businesses. I work with a number of different businesses that now actually employ on values. And what we did as athletes is we actually created an environment where 31 athletes looked each other in the eye and said, what do we want to be remembered by? Rather than previous Olympic Games or previous environments that I've been a part of, where we have this mission statement that's put up where we make tea and we never actually read it. So as athletes, we said, right, what do we want to be remembered by? We want to own that process. We want to feel empowered by creating it and therefore going out and living it. And ladies and gents, a lot of the time when I work in businesses, I find these big words that we feel very proud to put on a wall, like accountability, unity. But what do they mean? What do they mean to each individual within that group? Do they genuinely reflect to each and every single person what it is that you or we as executive level staff feel that we should put onto the employee body? So what we said is, as the employee body within my world, we said, right, we want to be remembered by inspiring the future, creating history, being alive, be the difference. We are winners. Ladies and gentlemen, those words are words we use every day. They are words that we actually were able to both nurture and challenge around every day within the elite environment. So it wasn't up to the executive level staff to actually say, right, this is how you're going to live, this is what you're going to believe, and this is how you're going to go about your business. It was actually us as athletes saying to another athlete, that's not good enough. We expect more. Are you being alive in the moment? Can we challenge you because it's not acceptable? And then not only that, understanding each individual person so that on occasions, because we invested time in our people, we started to say, right, do we challenge or do we nurture you? Are you somebody that needs your arm popped around you to support you and help you through this issue? Or are you somebody on occasion, because you keep missing the target and that will cost us, are you somebody that we need to work with directly to make sure you are, that horrible word, accountable? So with a said athlete who kept missing the target, I said, I will run until such time as you start hitting the target. Because as a defender, quite frankly, if our forwards miss the target, we are running anyway. So I continued to self-sacrifice and keep running after training until such time as she consistently hit the target. To give you some sort of idea of that underdog element that I just spoke about, I said we were ranked 7th. We played world number 1 in the Olympic final, which is the Dutchies, so the Netherlands, who had actually won 2 Olympic Games beforehand, and were going to be the first team in history going for 3 Olympic gold medals on the bounce. I hope there's no Dutchies in the room, but I've got to say, I'm pretty, apologies, not. So 3 Olympic Games on the bounce. But ladies and gents, we also, on the day, got into their circle 6 times and scored 3 goals. They got into our circle 26 times and scored 3 goals. There were moments where I just saw wave upon wave of Dutch attack, where you feel like your head cannot come above water. And I remember those moments because I remember Kate Richardson-Walsh, who's captained our country for 18 years alongside me. And I remember seeing the whites of her eyes and her nostrils flaring. No doubt you've all experienced this when that same client is coming to complain again, and you have to put that brave face on. That's exactly what she was doing, and I could see it, and I knew she was slipping. I knew she wasn't on task, and I knew I had to help her. Because our coach can bellow whatever he wants from the stand and assume we can hear him, but on no occasion can he actually change what's going on the field. And I knew, because I'd invested time in her, I knew all I had to say was, mate, we got this, I'm with you. And immediately that would lift a fellow teammate. Because we don't work in job descriptions. We don't box ourselves into saying, right, the right wing is, or the left wing is my responsibility. And then if the centre forward Kate gets beaten by the centre forward, I step off my player. Yes, my responsibility. I step off my player and I engage to assist her. So why do we create these job descriptions where people within the environment of the corporate sector say, sorry, not my job? If you're a team player, it doesn't matter what's required of you, whether that means you have to go and make tea for a meeting and you're a director, it doesn't matter. What is the job in hand and what do you need to do? So as I said, you can see in the top left-hand corner for you that there was an amazing group of women. But we are supported by a great backroom staff. So these are the data analysts, or whatever it may be. These are the people that actually provide us with the technical, tactical, medical, all of those capabilities to step out in an environment that we feel safe, so we can go out there and perform. They provide us with the data so that when we give our presentation, we're able to just deliver. They create an environment away from home that we're able to thrive in. So what we need to do within our environments is encourage people to be able to take those educated risks, encourage them to feel alive, and use language that we all understand, not words that are just put up on a wall, not words that aren't constantly referred to, so that we're able to start understanding and nurturing around it. You will notice that there are actually 3 athletes in that top photograph that are not holding gold medals. It is the really harsh reality of an elite environment. These are the 17th, 18th, and 19th player. There are 16 athletes that get selected to represent our country, 31 that train full-time to try and be the lucky one to get a bum on that seat to go to Rio. There are then that 17th, 18th, and 19th player, and they are the epitome of team, because they have to sit in the stands whilst the team takes the field on a hope, wish, and prayer that somebody gets injured and they get a chance to get out on the field. And whilst I joke, inside they are self-combusting, because they have to put a smile on their face. They have to tell us how great we were when we had the opportunity to perform for our country. They have to put their arms around us, tell us that we're going to be great, and send us back out there again to perform at their own expense. Horrible position to be in. But that, to me, shows what a team is. That, to me, shows people willing to be sacrificed in order for us to achieve something potentially, obviously the risk affiliated to it, potentially great. I'm also somebody that retired after the 2012 Olympics. I retired. I moved back to Africa, my home. I became a pilot, and I worked in airline surveillance for wildlife protection for 3 years. 10 months before Rio, one fateful April morning, I got a phone call from the Great Britain's coach asking me to consider returning. I initially laughed, having not played hockey for 3 years. And then I thought, well, what am I risking? All I'm risking is my pride. If I'm not good enough to make the team, I will make the team better by my inclusion and pushing somebody else to be the best version of themselves so that they get selected. So I up-sticked, left my home back in Kenya and came back and returned. And I thought, you know what? I'm properly putting my neck on the block here. A double Olympian, yes, bronze medalist, but no guarantees for me either. I returned to an environment where I was not put on funding. I was the 32nd athlete joining the squad of 31, and I had to prove myself into that team and then prove myself into the 16. In your environments, that's exactly the same, because at times there's director roles or managerial roles or whatever else, and there's people within your teams that assume that they are going to climb this ladder. They assume that they are the right person for the job, and suddenly you externally appoint. And suddenly those girls or guys or people know their noses are out of joint. How do you manage that? I am the opportunist. I come from an environment of confrontational conversations. So when I returned to the squad, I didn't just stay psychologically safe, and I talk about that a lot. Amy Edmondson comes up with a concept within the world of business around psychological safety. And sometimes it's easy to stay safe, isn't it? I'll just hide, I'll get myself back into the squad, I'll consolidate, I'll try and remember how to hold a hockey stick, get myself back in, and then see where I go. But actually, there's girls that I'm going to affect within this group massively. They are going to want to hate me, and that's okay. We need to be able to have those conversations. I need to be the bigger person and go and seek them out. Confrontational conversations, ladies and gents, are double-sided no matter what environment you're in, whether that's business or whether it's sport. I can only go so far. We have to create environments where somebody then meets you, the other side, to engage with you and be accepting of that discussion. It's not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable. As long as the intention is around using your culture to develop your people better and is for an outcome that you are unified by. So the intention was the best team to get selected. Us working together to achieve things was fundamental for that success to be obtained. So what I had to do was make sure that those individuals that I was going to directly affect had an opportunity to tell me what they genuinely thought. Tell me how we're going to work together to be able to mold and move forward. And categorically, those conversations were instrumental for my own well-being, my own inclusion within that group, as well as, of course, going out there and performing. Now, our Great Britain coach also I wrote a letter to him, and I said, in order for me to rejoin the team, you have to tell the group that you invited me. It wasn't me thinking 3 years out on a lovely little sabbatical out in Africa running around after elephants was going to be okay for me to now come back and join. Because the management, and a lot of us in this room are managers, the management of the situation is imperative for that person's inclusion. And you have a role to play in that too. So what have I been learning from that environment to create another one? As I've said before, we created a culture that we felt empowered by. We lived it, we challenged, we worked together, we used common language, and we constantly nurtured and challenged around it. The second massive factor for us was our training environment. We've heard a lot already about millennials, about the instant gratification of Instagram, and some of the things of the world that we now live in. Play up to that. That's exactly what our coach did. So we basically had environments where on a Thursday morning, we were given various different criteria to go out there and deliver on. And it was up to us to go out there and deliver. But what was given to us was different teams, different makeup of individuals, different combinations, different challenges. But all that was at stake was a photograph on GB Women's Instagram account. And he used that as a selection criteria. If your face is showing up every week on Great Britain Women's Instagram account, you are proving to me that you are a winner. He is now relating it back to our culture, our vision, our values, and our behaviors about being winners. It doesn't matter what team you're in. If you constantly are winning, then you're somebody that he wants within the team. So he played into that. So now he created this environment of outcome focus. This mini gold medal, or this mini medal that we were fighting for every single week. It's called chaos, because he would constantly change and stress and push us so that we were in this environment of actually trying to replicate what would be a semi-final of Olympic Games, or a final of Olympic Games if we were lucky enough to actually represent in that. And so if we're constantly stressed, if we're in this environment, we're always going to be pushing ourselves to try and make sure our face gets on that Instagram account. I have now used some of the skills I've learned from sport and business to create a charity called Tafauti. Ironically as well, it's aligned with the culture that I was from sport, because one of our cultural themes was about be the difference. Tafauti actually is together we make, being from a team, together we make Tafauti, which means difference. So together we make a difference. And my passion is Africa. My passion is helping or being a vehicle to help communities and wildlife in Africa. The other thing I hugely believe in is immersion. In order to ever really feel what your colleagues feel, you've got to put yourself into it. And my way of illustrating this is the fact that I became a female porter that went up Mount Kilimanjaro. I have never climbed a mountain. Granted, I am relatively athletic, but I have never climbed a mountain. I've never gone to altitude before, and I wanted to tell their story about female empowerment, about giving them an opportunity. And I believe, as I said, in immersion. I believe in getting in and understanding. It was 8 days carrying 25 kilos on my head, because that's what they do, for 8 days. Now, whilst I stand on this stage and look relatively tall, I think I definitely lost an inch or two over that 8-day period. But learning their trade, learning what they do day to day, I think is so important for us to actually be humble and understand it and be able to challenge or discuss various different elements of it. So as I said, we created this incredible culture. We went out and we lived it. We've heard about it already. It's only underpinned by trust. Fundamentally, we can all direct our various teams, but if we don't have trust from any member within the group and equality, no matter whether you're floor room level staff or your executive level, everybody has a voice. Everybody, they've got some great ideas, these youngsters coming through, trust me, so it's worth listening to them so that they can help us build an environment in which they then can thrive. To epitomize this, in the semi-final of the Olympic Games, our head coach said to us in our tactical briefing, which we'd have every day because it was all about being consistent, he said to us, "Do you trust me?" We all sort of nodded incessantly. Yeah, we're just about to step up in a semi-final against the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, okay? We'd always have a bloodbath. It's no different in rugby as it is to hockey, okay? We knew we were up for a fight. And he said, "Do you trust me?" And 100% we all went yes. He said, "Right, I'm going to ask you to do something, girls. We train in a full-time environment, 31 athletes, 5 days a week, just like a job, okay? And we had to take on tactics that were completely different to anything we'd ever trained before. We have the luxury of technology, so we can watch video analyze every single person, what they're doing, how they're doing it. And actually, trust me, our coach is the biggest tactician known to man, and he knows what every athlete's going to do before they even have the ball. So he created or decided that our tactics, in order to beat this team, would have to be a certain way, a way in which we'd never trained. And so all we did was we got the Sabutio out, which is his little board, and he started moving all these figurines around, going, right, if that's you, you need to go over here, da, 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 da. All of these formations that we'd never trained before. But he said, girls, one thing, you must score within the first 10 minutes, because they're going to be at 6s and 7s running around after you trying to work out what you're doing. Within that time, because I know their management team, they will work out what you're doing and be able to counteract it. Thank God the goal went in after 8 minutes and we all took a sigh of relief and were able to go back to normality. But if that doesn't epitomize trust, then I don't know what does. It is unique in its composition. I wish I could have bottled up our culture and be able to sell it for millions to all businesses that I interact with now, because it's very much, everyone's keen for it to be on the market. But at the same time, your teams are made up of very specific individuals. We took time to understand each individual and try and understand when they're on their A game, this is how they look, feel, and act. When they're slipping to their Z game, which we just heard about Miranda, was it? Slipping to her Z game where she wasn't on it. How do we help her? How do we get her back on task? How do we support her? Are you the right person to approach her as a manager, or is somebody who works as a colleague alongside of the right person? This is the kind of information that we need to gather. So within that, it's now about immersion. It's now about utilizing some of the environments that us sporting athletes have been lucky enough and privileged enough to have, to be able to pull us into environments such as yours, performance environments, so that we're able to understand, possibly help, support, nurture, and build a unity of trust that's unique to you and your composition and your organizations. So to take you back to this world of reinvention that I went through, this fact of immersion that I've just said, because I think the only way you actually understand is by us getting in and being able to understand your teams. People said, why did you climb Kilimanjaro? Why did you do it? Because it hurt and I couldn't move my neck for a long time. The reason I did it is not for equality and purely only gender equality. It was also about opportunity and lack of opportunity. If women are being picked purely or not being picked purely on gender because they don't think that they're physically capable of doing the challenge, now I have a problem. If it's man versus woman and a man's better at the job, then so be it. Absolutely, go for it. But when you have an environment, when you get back down to the bottom of the mountain and there's men and women all lined up and walking safari teams of people, the tourists all come and people all carry your bags. For 19 people going up Kilimanjaro within our group, there were 83 porters to carry their things for them. It gives opportunity. It gives jobs, don't get me wrong. But being somebody that's a fluent Swahili speaker, I could actually get the truth from those guys about how they feel about it. The fact that one of the girls I was working with, it's taken her 10 years to go from being a porter to now a guide, because purely was held back on her inability to speak English. So being able to support these porters, to be able to upskill them and understand their environment, encourage other walking communities to actually start using females as options, because I was there to tell their story about immersion. As I said, it wasn't built on anything else other than just being in it, living it, breathing it, and then actually going out and delivering around it so that then I could comment on it. That is the only way, I think, in my environment that I've lived and breathed. Because I'm from a team that created a very, very special moment. It captured the world in the Olympics because we were underdogs, and us Brits love an underdog. And I've said before, we come from an environment of opportunity. In the Olympic final, I only ever scored one outfield goal in my whole life, and that was in the Olympic final. And I'm right defender. What I was doing in the circle, to this day, I cannot tell you. The coach, even at the end of the game, came up to me when we'd won emphatically on one-on-ones with the keeper, which I'm sure most people were hiding behind their sofas to watch, me included. And literally, he said to me, "What the beep were you doing in the circle?" And I said, "I don't know. I saw an opportunity because my centre defence was left with my player. So there was a 2-on-1 at the back. We were advanced on the left flank. A ball getting crossed left to right in hockey, obviously is coming across your path. You don't ever hit it one time because it took a deflection. So now it's a bouncing bomb coming left to right. So I swiped at it. And unbelievably, it pimpled over. I think I was blowing at the time to try and help it over the line. But ultimately, I am the opportunist. I saw a gap. 9 times out of 10, we wouldn't have pulled that off. We probably would have overturned the ball and would have had a 2-on-1 at the back. We were 2-1 down, and I thought if there's ever an opportunity to take a risk, maybe it's now. Thank you.